So, you think you know Brazil? You're probably picturing Carnival, maybe a legendary footballer with a magical touch or that one song you can't get out of your head. And you're not wrong. But that's like knowing America just from seeing a picture of a hamburger. Brazil is massive. It's a continental-sized country that's so big, it sometimes feels like it's holding the rest of South America in a gentle hug. It's a place of staggering beauty and equally staggering complexity. A nation painted in the most vibrant colors imaginable. But behind the rhythm and the spectacle, there's a history that's just as epic. It's a tale of ancient peoples' colonial ambition and a long, winding road to becoming the global icon we know today. To get a handle on this sprawling story, we're going to break it down. Think of it like a multi-course Brazilian churrasco, where we sample different cuts to get the full flavor. First, we'll go back to the very beginning, to the indigenous era, long before any European ships appeared on the horizon. Then, we'll get into the arrival of the Portuguese, a moment that changed everything and set the stage for centuries of transformation. After that, we'll look at Brazil's unique path to independence, which involved an emperor. Yes, an emperor in the Americas, it's a whole thing. Finally, we'll dive into the roller coaster of the modern era, a story of booms, busts, and the incredible cultural explosion that gave the world samba and so much more. It's a story filled with drama, contradiction, and an unbelievable amount of resilience. You see, Brazil's history isn't a straight line. It's more like a samba, with its own intricate steps, sudden turns, and an irresistible beat that pulls you in. It's a narrative shaped by rainforests and coastlines, by the forced migration of millions, and by the creative genius that emerged from the mixing of cultures. Understanding this past is the key to understanding the Brazil of today, a nation that is constantly reinventing itself while holding on to the deep, complex roots that make it unlike anywhere else on Earth. So, grab a caipirinha, get comfortable, and let's get into the incredible story of Brazil. This journey is about more than just dates and names. It's about how a land of Brazil wood became a land of coffee, and then a land of industry. It's about how the brutal legacy of slavery coexists with a culture celebrated for its joy and unity. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped the Brazilian people, their politics, their passions, and their place in the world. By looking at these distinct periods, we can see the threads that connect the past to the present. From the first inhabitants of the Amazon to the bustling streets of São Paulo. It's a story that's still being written, and it's one of the most fascinating tales on the planet. Before the year 1500, before Portugal, before the name Brazil even existed, this vast territory was already home to millions of people. This wasn't an empty land waiting to be discovered. It was a vibrant, populated world teeming with hundreds, if not thousands, of distinct nations and tribes. Tupi-Guarani, whose people were masters of their environment. They weren't just surviving in the forest, they were thriving. They lived in villages, often surrounded by wooden palisades for protection, and built large communal houses called malocas from timber and palm leaves, where entire extended families would live together. It was a society deeply connected to the natural world around it. Life was intricately woven into the rhythms of the forest and the coast. These communities were skilled farmers, cultivating crops like manioc, corn beans, sweet potatoes. They were also expert hunters and fishers, bows, arrows, and sophisticated traps. They knew the secrets of the Amazon, the patterns of the seasons, and the properties of countless plants for food, for medicine, for spiritual rituals. This wasn't a primitive existence. It was a highly adapted and sustainable way of life, perfected over thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and experience. The cultural landscape was as diverse as the ecological one: languages, belief systems, and social structures. Some groups were semi-nomadic, moving their villages every few years to allow the forest to regenerate, while others were more settled along the fertile riverbanks and coastlines. They had rich oral traditions, passing down epic stories of creation, heroic ancestors, and the spirits of the forest from one generation to the next. Art was expressed in intricate featherwork, sophisticated pottery, and body painting, each with its own symbolic meaning. Community was everything, with strong bonds of kinship defining social responsibilities and individual identity. This world, in all its complexity and richness, was the foundation of Brazil. The indigenous peoples were the original Brazilians, and their influence, though often overlooked, endures. Their knowledge of the land, their agricultural contributions, and their words are woven into the fabric of the nation. Ipanema to the state of Paraná, many Brazilian place names have indigenous roots. The story of Brazil doesn't begin with the arrival of ships from across the ocean. It begins much earlier, with the first human footprints in the Amazon rainforest and along the sun-drenched coasts, in a world that was about to be changed forever. And then, one day in April of 1500, the horizon changed. A fleet of Portuguese ships spotted land commanded by an aristocrat named Pedro Álvares Cabral. They were supposedly on their way to India, but they ended up on the coast of what would become Brazil. At first, the Portuguese weren't all that impressed. There was no obvious gold, no silver, none of the spices they were looking for. What they did find was a lot of a particular type of tree, the pau-brasil. Brazilwood logs, and dye. This tree produced a valuable crimson dye, highly sought after in Europe for coloring luxury textiles. For the first few decades, this wood was the main attraction, a commodity that gave this new colony its name. Soon, however, the Portuguese realized the real treasure wasn't the trees, but the soil. The coastal climate was perfect for growing sugarcane, a crop that was like white gold in the 16th century. This realization sparked the first major economic boom and fundamentally shaped the colony's future. The Portuguese crown granted huge tracts of land to wealthy individuals who established vast sugar plantations, or engenhos. This wasn't small-scale farming. It was an industrial enterprise that required an immense amount of labor. Initially, the colonists tried to force the indigenous population to work, but disease and resistance made this system unsustainable for them. So they turned to a different, far more horrific solution. This is the darkest and most defining chapter of colonial Brazil, the transatlantic slave trade. To fuel the insatiable demand for labor on the sugar plantations, the Portuguese began the systematic and brutal trafficking of enslaved people from Africa. Over the next 3 centuries, nearly 5 million African men, women, and children were forcibly brought to Brazil in horrific conditions, more than to any other single country in the Americas. They were treated not as human beings but as property, forced to endure backbreaking work, cruel punishments, and the complete stripping of their freedom. This system of slavery became the engine of the colonial economy, underpinning not just sugar, but every major economic cycle that followed. The economy continued to evolve. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, gold and diamonds were discovered deep in the interior, in the region that would become Minas Gerais, or General Mines. This discovery set off a massive gold rush, drawing colonists, adventurers, and more enslaved Africans from the coast into the heartland. Boomtowns like Ouro Preto sprang up, adorned with magnificent Baroque churches financed by mineral wealth. This shift moved the colony's economic center of gravity southward and led to the capital being transferred from Salvador to Rio de Janeiro in 1763 to better control the flow of gold. But through it all, from Brazilwood, the story of Brazilian independence is one of the strangest in the Americas. It doesn't involve a bloody, drawn-out war against the mother country, not like in the United States. Instead, it involves Napoleon Bonaparte and a royal family on the run. In 1807, Napoleon's armies marched on Lisbon. The entire Portuguese royal court packed their bags. They boarded a fleet of ships. They sailed to Brazil. They set up shop in Rio de Janeiro. Rio overnight became the capital of the Portuguese Empire. For the first time, a European empire was being ruled from one of its colonies. Dom João opened Brazil's ports to trade with friendly nations, mainly Britain. He established a national bank. He founded medical schools. He founded military schools. He brought a printing press. He brought libraries. He brought artists to Rio. The colony began to feel less like a colony and more like the center of the world. After Napoleon's defeat, pressure grew for the king to return to Portugal. In 1821, Dom João sailed back. He left his son Dom Pedro as regent. He reportedly told him,
Pedro, if Brazil is to break away, let it be with you, who will respect me, rather than with one of those adventurers.
The Portuguese government tried to roll back Brazil's status. The Brazilian elites weren't having it. They rallied around Dom Pedro. On September 7, 1822, on the banks of the Ipiranga River, he declared,
Independência ou morte.
With that, Brazil was independent. But Brazil became an empire, with Dom Pedro I as emperor. This path avoided fragmentation and civil wars. The empire lasted 67 years. First under Dom Pedro I, then under his son Dom Pedro II. Coffee rose to replace sugar plantations, coffee plantations and export. But slavery persisted. Other American nations abolished it. Brazil clung to it. Dom Pedro II opposed slavery personally. But the powerful coffee barons and landed elites resisted abolition. Pressure grew from abolitionists inside Brazil and from countries like Great Britain. In 1888, Princess Isabel signed the Lei Áurea, the Golden Law, abolishing slavery. With the emperor abroad, the act sealed the empire's fate. Elites felt betrayed and withdrew support. In 1889, a bloodless military coup overthrew the emperor and declared a republic. The birth of the Brazilian Republic in 1889 didn't magically solve all the country's problems. It kicked off a new era of turbulence, transformation, and dramatic swings. The old republic was dominated by the coffee oligarchs of São Paulo, the cattle ranchers of Minas Gerais. They took turns running the country, coffee with milk. A massive wave of immigration arrived from Europe and from Japan. People came to work on coffee plantations and in growing cities. São Paulo modernized rapidly. Rio de Janeiro modernized too. New boulevards appeared. Electric trams filled the streets. Burgeoning industries grew. The Great Depression of 1929 collapsed coffee prices and threw politics into chaos. Out of turmoil rose Getúlio Vargas, who seized power in 1930. Vargas pushed industrialization. He created labor laws and fostered national identity. He also ruled as a dictator during the Estado Novo. His economic shift from agriculture to industry shaped modern Brazil. The decades after Vargas were a political roller coaster. Democracy in the 1950s and early 1960s brought rapid development. The ambitious new capital, Brasília, was built. In 1964, the military, with quiet U.S. backing, staged a coup. A 21-year military dictatorship followed. The regime drove an economic miracle. But political freedoms were crushed, censorship spread, and opponents were jailed or exiled. By the early 1980s, Abertura began, a slow political opening. Civilian rule returned and a new constitution was adopted in 1988. Since then, Brazil is a democracy, noisy and often challenging. It battled hyperinflation. It tackled deep social inequality with social programs. And it emerged as a major global player. A bumpy 20th century forged a resilient, dynamic, and complex nation. You can't talk about Brazil without talking about its culture because that's where the country's soul truly comes alive. Brazilian culture is not one single thing. It's a vibrant, ever-evolving fusion, a magnificent mestiçagem, or mixing, indigenous European African. This blend is the secret ingredient in everything that the world recognizes as uniquely Brazilian. It's a culture born not in palaces or government halls, but in the streets, on the plantations, and in the communities where different worlds collided, sometimes painfully, but always creatively. It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to create joy and beauty, even in the face of hardship. Music and dance are perhaps the most powerful expressions of this fusion. Samba, the heartbeat of Brazil, has its roots in the rhythms brought by enslaved Africans, particularly from Angola and the Congo, blended with European harmonies. It was born in the communities of Afro-Brazilians in Rio de Janeiro and Salvador, and it evolved into the driving force behind the world's most famous party, Carnival. This explosive pre-Lenten festival is a sensory overload of dazzling costumes, massive parades, and non-stop samba, a moment when the entire country seems to erupt in a collective celebration of life. But Brazilian music is more than just samba. It's also the cool, sophisticated bossa nova, the rebellious tropicalia, and the powerful rhythms of axé and funk carioca. Then there is football, or futebol. In Brazil, football is not just a sport. It is a national passion, a religion, a language understood by everyone. The Brazilian style of play, creative, fluid, and joyful, known as O Jogo Bonito, the beautiful game, is seen as a reflection of the national character itself. The country has produced a seemingly endless line of legendary players: Pelé, Zico, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Neymar, who are revered as national heroes. On match days, the country comes to a standstill. The yellow and green of the national jersey become a unifying symbol, bringing together people of all classes and colors in a shared hope and sometimes a shared heartbreak. And of course, you can taste the history in the food. The national dish, feijoada, is a perfect culinary metaphor for Brazil. It's a hearty, slow-cooked stew of black beans, pork cuts, beef cuts, traditionally served with rice collard greens, orange slices, and farofa, toasted manioc flour. Its origins are traced back to the slave quarters on plantations, where leftover scraps of meat were combined with the humble black bean to create a rich, nourishing meal. Like so much of Brazilian culture, it's a dish that transformed the ingredients of a difficult history into something profoundly soulful and delicious, a symbol of resilience and fusion served up on a plate. So, what is Brazil today? After this whirlwind tour through its history, one thing is clear. Brazil is a country of immense scale and profound contradictions. It is a nation that holds the largest rainforest on Earth, the Amazon, which acts as the lungs of the planet. Yet it constantly struggles with deforestation and threats to its protection. It is a top 10 global economy, a powerhouse of agriculture, and a major industrial center. Yet it remains plagued by deep-rooted social inequality, a gap born of its colonial past. It is a place where a culture of immense joy, creativity, and human warmth. This joy coexists with daily challenges, urban violence and political instability. The story of Brazil is not a simple tale of triumph. It's an ongoing narrative of struggle and resilience. The hopeful, passionate spirit of the Brazilian people propels the nation forward. You see it in an entrepreneur opening a small business in a favela, in an artist painting a mural on a city wall, and in community activists fighting to preserve culture and environment. From a Portuguese colony built on sugar and slavery to a vibrant, multi-ethnic democracy, that journey shows Brazil's capacity to change. Its music, its art, and its passion for life have become global exports. The country's story is a continuous samba, intricate steps, moments of pure elation, and a rhythm that never stops. It's a dance of overcoming adversity and finding reasons to celebrate. In the end, Brazil is a promise, a society that can, despite its scars, build a more inclusive and equitable future. A people whose creativity can offer solutions beyond their borders. The story is far from over. It feels like the most interesting part is just beginning. It remains a work in progress, a masterpiece still being painted, a samba whose final triumphant beat has yet to be played, and the whole world is watching and listening with anticipation.